Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Temple 420. Not quite a sess, but just really wanted to go through a Bible study, look at the information, and go through it. We tried to do a Sabbath sess this morning, but had a whole bunch of technical issues. And I was through, and myself, I was reading through Matthew, particularly Matthew 8 today, because I've been taking a chapter of Matthew every day of the week and going through it and seeing what I could see and figuring out there. My study I was looking at here and wanted to go back through with you guys is on where Jesus heals, Yeshua heals the possessed when he comes to the island. Let's go into Matthew and just read it here, and then we'll talk about how different things I ran into when I read this and what I figured out here for you. And when he was to come to the other side of the Gergean seas, there met him two possessed with devils, coming out of their tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no man may pass away. And behold, they cried out, saying, What have we had to do with thee, Yeshua, Jesus, thou Son of God, Son of Elohim? And then, of course, I make it smaller here. Thou art come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them a herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If you cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, Go. And they were come out, and they went into the herd of the swine. And behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters. And they that kept them fled, and they went their ways into the city, and told them everything that was befallen to the possessed of the devils. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they besought him that he would depart of their coasts. First thing I saw in here I found interesting is that it refers to two men. I was trying to wondered where that was. Right here it says two possessed in the King James. I was in the Jewish one here earlier, and it did say the two men controlled. Just a different way of saying it, of course. But I always heard the story of with Legion and the one guy that was possessed, so I was interested in where that came from too, and looked into that. That was the main one that stuck out to me, but there's some other things that I reaped and got from it here. When we broke down the two, I had some discussions with some people, and then I also pulled it up here to look more into it myself. And when I referred to the verses that the other ones on here, we'll also see it not only in this Matthew 8:28, but the same story also goes on in Mark 5:11. And they came into the other side of the sea, into a country called the Gergesenes. And when he came out of the ship, immediately they met him, the tombs of a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, not with chains, because he'd often been bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder to him, and the fetters broke into pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And it also happens again and comes up in Luke 8:26. And they arrived at the country of Gergesenes, which is over the Galilee. And they went forth to the land, and there they met him, a city of a certain man, which had devils a long time, and no clothes, neither abode in house, but in the tombs. When he saw that, Jesus cried out and fell down before him. A large voice said, What do I have to do with thee, Jesus? Thou art the Son of God, the Most High. I beseech you, torment me not. This is the one here too. Yes. For he commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for oftentimes they had caught him, and he had kept bound within the chains and the fetters he breaks, and the bands were driven out of the devil in the wilderness. And Jesus asked him, saying, What is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entered into him. So we both have Luke and Mark speaking with the one man. But when I looked into it, they said oftentimes there is eyewitness selectivity, where there's a focus on the dominant speaker. And that guy was probably more notorious and more known than the other guy was. So Mark and Luke recounted it as just the one guy who was in main focus. It also states that Matthew often likes to do the pairing pattern and kind of two people and the two witnesses principle. Two witnesses is where he'll be as well. It was interesting when I looked and read my Lamsa version and my Lamsa commentary, because it takes the word that it means for the man as a diwana, which can mean insane or lunatic. So he renders the demon-possessed men as two insane men. And he said it related to also that first century ideas that the illnesses and all were completely done by demons and evil spirits, which I don't necessarily think would be wrong in my breakdown with that, but I think it's way more complicated than that. Sometimes it can be a host of things. It was interesting, he also says that he thought, since they were going to be with Yeshua, and with him they did not want the cleanness, so the going to the pigs was to remove the stigma from the men, and also go, he said, with some of the pork things, since they shouldn't have pork, that they also would have recognized that and had a relation with that too. Either way, it sounds like it's definitely a big event there with that. And let's see here. There were some interesting things too when I looked into some further retrospectives that said that they thought maybe the referring to Legion was a satire on the Romans, taking off of their legions and stuff. It particularly says, many see the Legion as a mass plunge of 2,000 pigs, unclean animals linked to the Gentiles, as a symbolic takedown of the occupying Roman legio ex forensis, whose emblem was a boar, and how Yeshua expels the oppressive legion from the land. And it's interesting there because, too, I noticed that in the Matthew, they end it there with the story, I think. I just saw it there. Let's pull it back. Yeah, that completely ends the story there in Matthew 8. And then when we're looking at the other versions, they actually continue to want to go with Christ. And we go here, 5, Mark 1:5. Right, no, 5:1-20. Sorry, this is always crazy. Bouncing off the walls here. Yeah, and Mark 5:20. They came to the coast or the beach and started talking to Christ and them and asking them, praying to them to depart from their coasts and leave the island. And when he was getting into the boat, the possessed guy that had the demon prayed that he might go with him as well. And it says, howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith to him, go home to thy friends, and tell them how great the Lord has done for thee, and has compassion on thee. And then he departed, began to publish in Decapolis how the great things Jesus had done for him, and how men did marvel. Sorry, also in the King James here, I switched to a different environment here and switched to the King James. I should stay almost in the Jewish version, because those ways, like making publication, is such an odd way that you would say it to me. Yeah, he went off and proclaiming in the 10 towns how much Yeshua had done for him, and everyone was amazed. That's even more interesting that there's 10 towns there. I love that I can flip through the different versions here and see so many different things here with this. The guy wanted to go with him, and he said, nope, go to your people and tell. And to my understanding, this is the first encounter that Christ has that he actually heals somebody out of demonic things and gets them taken care of here with that on the first healing. Oh, what else? Is there anything more interesting here? And those are the things that I got out of going through here and looking and seeing what I could find on this specific section, and I found it pretty enlightening. I hope somebody else did too, and you feel encouraged to read the Word out there and study, and have a blessed day.